When you first open DAZ Studio, you will notice that it looks a little different. If you've ever used Poser, you know that this is definitely not Poser. When you first start, it starts with personalize your installation of DAZ Studio 4. You normally you have to fill this in, and the required is at least your name. You can also add your email and website; those are optional. But to get rid of the screen, you will have to actually fill in your name. I'm not going to, but so for every time I start it up, it will continue to show this screen. But if you fill it out, it won't. So if you're filling it out, make sure that you put, if you're selling stuff or you're creating product, that you put your vendor name in the name field and not your full real name if you don't use that as a vendor. That way everything you save will be saved under your vendor name, your data files and everything else, and we'll get into that later. So I'm going to go ahead and I can click do not show this again, but it will. So once you start, you see two panels along the side with tabs along their sides, like these. And these panes are for different tasks that you do in DAZ Studio. I can also see up here on the activity bar there is a bunch of other tabs. So I've got actors, wardrobes, and props, pose and animate, lights and camera, and render. So all of these tabs up here, I can go through my sets and see what I have in here. Say pose and animate, I can actually, it's got my posing tab. I've got parameters, scene, content library, tool settings, lights and cameras. I can set up and find in this side, the left side, I can find my lights and my cameras in my content library, or I can come over here and see what's in my scene, parameters, content library as well, but this is the version where you look for the icons yourself instead of the smart content, and then tool settings. Now, if you don't want this layout, there is a way to change it. And when you change it, you can get a look that works for you, a layout that works for your workflow. So what you're going to do that, we're going to go to Window, and we're going to go to Workspace, and we're going to do Select Layout. The Select Layout will show you a preview of the layout, and there are about 5 of them. Full Service Beta, as you can see, Hollywood Boulevard, Self-Serve, City Limits, and 3D Bridge. Because the preview is very small, you can't actually see what it actually looks like when you're working with DAZ Studio. So the best way to do this is select one and hit accept. It will apply it to the UI, and now you can see what it does. As you can see, this one has a little more up on the activity bar. I have my smart content. I've got a shaping panel here and surfaces. I've got actors, hair, and wardrobe. Then there's prop sets, pose and animate, so I can find my poses easier. And then there's the animation timeline down here. Lights and camera like before. I can find my lights, I can find my cameras and everything. And render and share. Render settings in your render library. I'm not real happy with this one, so we'll go and look at another one. We'll go with Hollywood Boulevard. I think that's the next one. Yeah. And as you can see, here's our smart content pane on the left, and on the right we've got our content library, tool settings, parameters, and scene. And again, you got your tabs up in the activity bar, which are actors, wardrobes, and props. Pose and animate again, lights and camera, and render. And as you see, render and render library are right there. Not much different than the other one. So, but if you're using just content, this would be perfect for you. Going back, we'll go to another layout, self-serve, accept. And as you can see, it changes the background to a little gray. And we've got over here our scene, our content library, our smart content, And although tabs are oriented along the top instead of along the side, there is no right panel over here. The good thing though is you can take and drag these tabs off and place them where you want to. So you can put this over here if you really want to. Things like this, you can kind of customize it as you want. Drag it back and put it wherever. And as you can see, this is loading and creating, posing and shaping. So we've got the puppeteer, we've got scene and content library and tool settings. We got the animate tool and the timeline bar. Lighting and cameras, we've got lights and cameras along the side over here. Surface and rendering, this is where you content library, tool settings, and then you can come over here and adjust your settings for your surfaces. And then we got building and scripting. So if you're writing in the RSL or scripting language, this is the pane that you would use to do that. Again, I'm not real happy with this one, so we'll go and look at the last one, or last two I think it is. So that was self-serve. This is city limits. I tend to like city limits a little bit more because I've got tabs along all of them. And again, you can customize it. If you don't want the animate tool and the timeline, you can come down here to this little arrow with the 3 bars, and you can close the pane and do the same again for the timeline. So then you have this bigger scene with 2 panes on the side, and you got menus there. This is shaping, posing, and as you can see, it doesn't have an activity bar at the top. So all your tools are going to be in here, right here, where you don't have to switch many panes or tabs. Last one we'll look at is 3D Bridge. And that's interesting. I think my graphics is just a little screwed up. Anyway, you have your tabs right here along the side: cameras, scene, smart content, content library, shaping, and posing. And then arrows if there's more. So you got your posing, power pose, and puppeteer right there. I think for me this is a little too jumbled, and I don't like having all my tabs on one side. So this wouldn't be the one for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and, workspace, select layout. I'm going to choose city limits. Because like I said, that's the best one for me. So I'm going to keep it this one. Now, you can also come in and set up your style. And style is more font settings and colors, but they're also orientation of where the tabs are and everything. So as you can see, there's Main Street, Highway, and Dark Side. Dark Side is a bit darker. I don't really like it, but it all depends on what you want to do. I much kind of prefer Highway because the font, as you can see, is a little bit smaller. So if I hit accept, you see that the font on these tabs are now a little bit smaller. So I feel like it's more open and easier for me to use. Again, you can use whichever style you want. You can also customize the colors, and I'll show you where you do that. As you can see, but you can, Main Street is a little bit the same font, but it orients the tab somewhat along the top. And you can read the descriptions of it. It doesn't really tell you what it is, but it'll help you to know some features of it. Like this is comprised of neutral gray tones and sharply contrasted yellow highlight that is intended to draw your attention. A bit like painted markings guiding you along the road to success. So again, I'm going to keep this on Highway and accept. Now after you've customized it, which if you wanted to, you could style, customize colors, and this would let you, now this is just for the UI. If it says background color, it's not talking the background of your viewport, it is background of your UI. So if I was to change that, I'll go ahead and do that right now. You'll see that this pink bar up here has now turned pink. And we'll go back down to style, customize colors. And this background here has turned pink, which is a bright pink. So I'm going to change that back to the light gray there. And you can play around with this and set all your colors up so that you know what it is, and so it'd be easier in first glance for you. So I'm going to preview, and that's pretty much what I want. And I hit accept. Now after you've done all that and you want to save it, you can go and select layout or save layout as, and then you can call this my custom or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to save my all of these as custom so that it saves. And then you could write my first custom studio layout. Then you hit accept. And then it'll tell you it is saved. And then you can do the same thing for your style. So style, save style as. And again, we could my style. And you don't have to put a description in. My first style setting. Accept. And that's pretty much it. So now that you've got your layout set out, now it's time to really look at the tools and how they work. For me, I look at the DAZ Studio formats and poser formats right here, and I don't like the side to side. You might, but I much prefer a tree view. So if you come up here to this again, arrow with the lines, you can view as list, view as tree, or view as side by side. So I'm going to view as a tree. And now I can just real easily go in and look at my tree there. You can, if you do view side by side, you can do the tree, and then you have the icons right here, which is fine in as much as that you want to see things right side by side like that. For me, I prefer the tree because it's oriented with the tree view on the north, on the top, and on the south side or the bottom you have your icons. So, and with this one I have 3 icons across, which makes it a little easier for me to see things. One of the first things you're doing when you're working with any program is you should always look at the menus up in the top and where it has file, edit, and create. I always mess with look at the preferences first because it will tell you a lot of things that you might need to know. So let's go edit preferences right there, and this comes up, and yours will say your name in the authorship information if you already saved it. If not, like mine says, no authorship information saved. And the reason I don't save mine is because I do a lot of testing and resaving, and because I'm saving other people's stuff, I do not want my information saved. You will probably want to do that. If you don't, you're going to have to fill in things that you might not have to otherwise. Okay, so we've got where it'll show you where your temporary files are. It will show you where your DSON cache files are. You can check for weekly, monthly, never, daily for updates, and it also has a handy button so that you can check for an update now. Startup. We can start up and load a scene file, or we can show the welcome page, which I'm going to uncheck that, and show metadata import page. Well, I want to import my metadata when I have some, so I want to show that. Load file. I'm not going to have it load a file. I need it blank because I always load new content in anyway. Scene tab. You can load a new scene. Same thing. You would browse for your scene, find it, select it, and then have it load. You can create a default camera, so every time you start a new file, it would start with a new camera. On Fit to auto-magnetize the figures with deforms, I'm going to leave that checked. Background colors. Propagate changes to all viewports. That's okay. Ignore settings when opening a scene file. Some of the scenes can be saved with like a bright blue background or a bright pink background, and maybe you don't want that to come into your scene. So I would have that ignore settings when opening a file, though I leave mine because, again, I test and I have to see if that happens. Record settings when saving a scene file. I always uncheck that because I don't want to record my scene settings. Backdrop image. If you've got like a picture of an anvil in the back, it can ignore that when it opens the scene file, or you can record that when you're saving it. I hit record and I turn that off because I don't want to record the settings. Render settings. Ignore when opening a scene file, or record when saving a scene file. Again, I'm going to uncheck both because I don't want it to record them, and I need to know if it's got it. So, but you will go through that and figure out what you want and which would work best for you. So set it up the way you want it. The interface. The splash image is the first image that when you start DAZ Studio, it shows. And there's two different. There's default and alternate, and I'll show you them in a few minutes. Tooltips. You can turn them on or off. I'll leave mine on just so that what a tooltip is, when you hover over the icon, it will tell you what that tool does. Disable animations. Well, I don't really want to disable them, so I'm going to leave that off. And then background image, you can default, cycle, or none. And this is up on the activity bar, which I don't have. But as you saw in the first few layouts we went, that would have an image up there, like a dragon or something, and it would cycle through or just stay on one. So you can set that up. I don't have to because, well, I don't have the activity bar. OpenGL, hardware details. Here's where you can find out everything about your OpenGL and what you need to know about it. So that's a very interesting tool that when you need it. Per pixel shading, I have mine off. You can turn yours on. Hardware anti-aliasing, I leave mine on. Display optimization, none. You can set it to better or best. I leave it at none. Backface lighting, you can turn this on or off. Texture resources performance, you can bring it up to quality or performance. And pixel buffer, you can turn on and off, and you can also set it at a certain buffer size here. The bridges, you can hexagon, show basic options or show advanced. And DAZ Studio comes with two bridges, which is hexagon and Bryce. So I'll show you where to find those. So you can send to hexagon, or you can send your scene to Bryce and work with that program as well. A really nice handy feature if you're using both programs. Miscellaneous, multi-threading, I have mine on. And then here's where you would hit your restore factory defaults. Content library, you can show file info tooltips, and I do. And if you're working with DAZ Studio, you see how in the scene file or scenes or content over here, it says move down, but there's no extension. If you have a .duf and say a .ds, it with the same name, it would show them, and you would see two icons. However, because you don't see the extensions, you don't know which one's the DUF and which one's the DSA. So what I do is I turn mine on because I want to be able to see the file extensions. And you can mark folders containing new content as new, which I'll leave that. Then you can, when loading items of the same type, when you're loading like two Genesis figures, you can ask to replace them. You can always ask, never replace regardless of the content type, and always replace. I'm going to leave mine as ask to replace. When loading a DUF character, show the character loading options dialog. Always load a new figure, which means that the character would load a new figure. And always apply the selected to the selected figure. So if you've got Genesis already in the scene and you hit the character, it will apply to that figure. I'm going to have it show the character loading options because if I have 2 or 3 characters in there, I'd want to make sure that I didn't apply it to the wrong character. And I don't really want it always loading a new one, so I'll leave it on to the show character. Then you have pose shaping preset loading. When importing a pose shaping file that exceeds limits, and that's the figure limits on every dial that's there, you again, you can have it turn limits off and turn limits on, or you can have it show the warning that it's out of limits. I have it show the limits because I need to know that. But if you don't want to have to always say turn limits off, then you can set that as always turn limits off. Or if you want to always have the limits on, you can always leave them on. This will mean if you leave them on, it will mean that if you apply a pose and it's out of limits, it will only go to the limits, and it may not be the right pose. And if you don't remember that you've got limits on always, then you might go, well, this pose looks broke. No, it's not broke. You've got limits on. That's why I always have it show the preset exceeds limits dialog. That way I know it's out of limits and I can decide what to do. Then this button, Directory Manager, Content Directory Manager. This is where, if you click this brings up your Content Directory Manager. And in here, you can set up where your DAZ Studio libraries are. And I'm actually going to remove the C users public documents because I never use that one. And then poser formats. And it has, actually it does not have my poser. So I would want to add that in. I'm going to leave my library because I do put like poser CFs files in there, so it's easier for me. I'm going to remove the C user public documents because I don't use that, but if you do, then let's say I want to add my poser directory, so I'll click up here on the poser formats. I'll hit add, and then I would go ahead and I would navigate to my poser installation. There we go, poser 2014, and you want to select the directory that is just above the runtime structure. So poser Pro 2014. If you have poser 2012, you would use that. If you use poser 9, same thing. So poser 2014. Now select the folder, and then as you can see, it jumps in right here. Now, if you in this video series, I will show you how to add really quickly directories to use. And if you remove all your directories when you next start up DAZ Studio and there's nothing in those formats, it will repopulate these directories back into your list. So you never really lose them. Okay, so you can also move the where these are. So if you want it to be the top one, or the move this to the bottom, you can do that. It doesn't really matter for me, so I'm just going to leave that alone. Then I'm going to hit accept. Now that I've set up all my preferences, I'm going to leave this. And so I'm going to hit apply. And as you can see over here, I now see that these extensions are moved down .dsa. And then I'll hit accept to save. And that is how easy it is to set up your preferences. Now I was going to show you the different splash screens because this was a new one on me and I learned this and I'm kind of happy with it. So we start with the default, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close DAZ Studio. Then I'm going to open it again, and this is the splash screen that's default. Fiery haired lady, pretty cool scene. Now if I want the alternate, come here, change it alternate, apply, accept, close DAZ Studio again, and then you're going to call up DAZ Studio, and see, as you can see, it's a new splash screen. So you can have different splash screens with that, which is really nice. I prefer the plain one, but whichever one you want. It's just a nice little kind of feature that so that you don't get bored with the scene that you're seeing. Now that you've got it all set up and ready to go to work, now we go into the different menus. And as you can see, there's a lot of icons on your GUI. There is your word or text menus up at the top, and all of these are different tools. There's also different tools when you see these this arrow with the lines. There can be different menus in there as well, and that is on each tab. So I have all of these over here. I've got different ones over here. If I choose smart content, I have less. If I choose scene, I have a whole bunch more. Render library, I only have render directory manager. And then I have make pane undockable, make group pane group undockable, and close pane. So if you don't want that pane to move, you can make them undockable so that they're locked in place. And see, if I go over here to shaping, I have a lot of more menu, even more there, about the same items, but I'll show you those in a few. So each one of these little arrows with the lines has a different menu, and it all depends on the tool that you're using. So, and not only that, you've also got more panes up here that you can apply for what you're needing. And I'll go over each one of these as we go along in this series, but this is where you would find your pane if you brought out, say, surfaces and accidentally closed it, and you're going, where's my surfaces? Well, window, panes, go down to surfaces, and there it is again. Then you can drag it and drop it in place so you restore it. And that's one reason why you might want to lock them down so that they don't disappear like that. Anyway, we're at about 30 minutes on this tutorial, and I don't want to run them too long or too big, so I'm going to pause here and then come back with the next tutorial, and we'll go over some of the menu options.